Vijay Kevalraman is expertise in that, because I was not there last year to take him there for that publication, but I hope it matches. But there are other publications which I'll draw your attention as to related party transaction, or section 144, that's management consultancy, or a board report which we write in our office, or a guidance note on schedule 3, all 3 division 1 to 3, FAQs on LLP, etc. There are several publications, and there are several groups also we form from time to time. I request you to be part of the group, be a speaker for corporate law at a national level, and I'll request you to take seriously this corporate law practice in future. And with this, I thank Roshani to give me this opportunity to be with you, all of you, on this subject as a chairman of Corporate Law and Corporate Governance Committee. We will keep on interacting with you on other things. Last year I was in PDC and we had a big challenge on retaining bank audit, which we successfully did. Otherwise it was almost lost. And again, every year there are new challenges. The institute, I am in the CRET. The CRET has been formed again. That is the Committee for Review of Education and Training. We will, 17, it was a new course has been announced, 1st July 17. We'll do it again on 1st July 22. And I'm a part of CRET. I like to talk to all of you on this in future about your suggestions on how the articleship should go in future. It's very, very important committee, and President has taken me in that, and I think we can all together give a lot of suggestions there. So there are several initiatives I can talk on today. Of course, we want to listen on LLP, where is the subject, but I'll continue to be with you and give you several updates from Institute which are very important. Thank you, friends. Thanks a lot for being with me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are honored to have you here with us. Thank you so much for all your kind words, sir. Now let's move forward. I request CA Mukesh Haseja, our Deputy Convener, to introduce our very own speaker, CA Vijay Kevalramani, sir. Mukesh, over to you.
Thank you, Roshni, for giving me an opportunity to introduce Vijay, sir. First of all, very warm welcome to all the members and Vijay, sir, Srinivasan, sir, and Jeetu, sir. To start with the introduction of Vijay, sir, he is a practicing chartered accountant since 26 years. His qualifications are BCom, LLB, LLM, FCA, MBA Finance, and CMA, Australia. He has also obtained the certification in forensic accounting. He is practicing in the field of direct tax appellate and fraud investigation, apart from routine practice of chartered accountancy. He also delivered various lectures and presented papers at various professional and other forums, include Rotary Club, on a wide range of topics like fraud investigations, LLPs, cyber crimes, budget, black money, income tax, to name a few. He has also been training a government auditors through Indian audit, accounts, boards on the topics like risk management and fraud reduction. He has also been invited to various government supreme auditors from Afghanistan on fraud deductions. He also authored a book published by All India Federation of Tax Practitioners titled LLP Simplified Through FAQs. He has also written various articles in various professional magazines on LLP. He has also been contributor to the background material for the Executive Masters Program, New Age Auditors of the Center of Audit Quality of ICI for the topic Assurance and Review Engagements. He is also invited by ICI Corporate Laws and Corporate Governance Committee to be part of the group to work on the requirements for rationalizing, reducing, and simplifying the related procedures to the LLP Act 2008. He is also involved in various professional associations like President of Tax Friends, All India Association of Sindhi Tax Practitioners, including CAs and advocates from the year 2016 to 18, now 2018 to 20. He's also been a President of Tax Practitioner Association Thane for the year 18-20. He's also been a National Treasurer of All India Federation of Tax Practitioners for the year 2021, a national body of tax practitioner. He's also a steering committee member of ICMI, Australia India chapter. He is also involved in various social activities and associations at like managing trustee of Sahiti Panchayat Mumbai since 2017. He's also been a president of American Institute of Sindhology Indian chapter. He's also been a president of Rotary Club of Thane Harbour, now Thane Royals, in 2018-19. He is also designated to be a district treasurer for the 22-23 in the Rotary district. He is also taken as honor member on 3 international Rotary clubs in various countries. With this, I introduce Vijay Kevalamani sir to start the lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mukesh, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you, Roshni, for inviting me to this session. At the outset, I would like to thank CCM Srinivas Joshi sir and dynamic chairman of the Kalyan Dombivli branch, Jitu Ramrakhiani, for being present and giving their kind words at the inaugural session. Friends, we can start this. Let me attach my presentation. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
The
It's
presentation
visible.
Friends, we are here to discuss something about LLP. LLP, as Srinivas Joshi sir said, I have been practicing since it has come into being. Whereas the thought of LLP came into other people much later, especially after when one good midnight new act called as the Companies Act 2013 was passed by the Parliament at midnight, and then it was notified, and then everybody saw that how draconian it was at that time. Subsequent, and then all these forms, the compliances were increased, the penalties were increased. Then everybody started thinking about a option, although much of them have been liberalized now in the Companies Act, but still that was when people started moving towards LLP. That was somewhere in around 2015, and then we all of a sudden got a rush to understand what is LLP and all. And then I was also requested by All India Federation to bring out a simplified book. So I had brought in a book of 275 FAQs with LLP. So let us, in this session, we will not only be understanding the features of the limited liability partnership, but also we'll be try to understand the documentation that has to be maintained. Although there are no procedures in the LLP Act or the documentation set in the LLP Act, unlike in the Companies Act, where there are a lot of things which are mentioned, what type of documents to be done, the procedures to be handled and all that. But still, based on my experience, I have just listed out something which can help a normal practitioner in his practice, and you can guide your clients how to maintain those documents and move about. So let us try to understand how the background first. Friends, as it all happens, it started with some committees. Everything started with committees. There was a need felt to simplify the business processes, especially for professionals. Then Naresh Chandra committee was appointed after so many committees, and they suggested why not we should have something around 2003. Naresh Chandra committee came out with a suggestion that let us have a LLP Act for the professionals. Then the industry people started shouting, why only professionals, why not us? Then another committee was formed under the leadership of J.J. Irani, and that committee gave recommendation that everybody should be included, and based on that, a bill was presented to the Parliament, and it was passed in December 2008. So that's why it was called as the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008. That's when the Limited Liability Partnership Act came into being in India. Although limited liability concept is not new in the globe, you can see it across the globe, be it Asian countries, be it America, be it European countries, be it Middle East. And it was notified officially with the notification of rules on the 1st of April 2009. So LLP rules were notified on 1st of April 2009, and hence the LLP Act officially came into being from the 1st of April 2009. This was the background. Having understood the background, let us understand the salient features of the LLP Act. Friends, the biggest feature that it has is that it gives you the benefits of both a company as well as a partnership. So it is it was to simplify the procedures, and there were some issues being faced in the partnership about the legal ownership and all that, and then unlimited liability. Company, there were certain issues like stringencies, compliances, and all that. So a midway was thought, and so if you see in the LLP Act, basically negatives are very less. You will see the benefits of both the Companies Act and the Partnership Act have been taken. We'll be looking into detail everything. So the first benefit that you would get is that is of a Companies Act is that you get a legal entity. Unlike in a partnership, it was difficult to maintain and justify prove a legal identity until you had registered partnerships, and there were a lot many issues coming in. So LLP Act gave it a legal identity. Another issue which was there in the partnership was the succession. So now the LLP Act has a perpetual succession. How it is done, we'll look later. The biggest advantage you have, again, this is a benefit of a company that is taken up, that is the limited liability. So the liability of the partners is limited to their share in the LLP. Yes, the partner who is actually responsible for the loss, only for him, the other partner's liability is limited, except the partner, if somebody can pinpoint that a particular partner or some of the partners were responsible for that loss, then their liability may not be limited, and certain circumstances as listed out maybe in the LLP Act or in the Income Tax Act, the liability of the partners is unlimited. Otherwise, the liability is very much limited. Then you start with minimum 2 partners, fine. One of them at least should be an Indian resident mandatory. Friends, please note that this was mentioned in the LLP Act 2008. Whereas in the Companies Act, this amendment was brought only in the 2013 Act. It was not there in the 56 Act. So, and why was this happened? Because in 2007, if you remember, there were many vanishing companies that had come that they were not able to trace the company, they were not able to trace the directors, the shareholders. So they thought that, and it was that time that this bill was presented to the Parliament. So this clause was included that one of the partners has to be an Indian resident, which is mandatory, and ultimately this was also incorporated in the Companies Act while doing the 2013. There is no maximum limit of partners. This is another advantage that we have. In a partnership, we have of 20 partners in a normal partnership and 10 in case of a banking. In case of your private limited company, earlier it was 50, now it's 200 the limit. Yes, in a public limited company, there is no upper limit. So here also you don't have upper limit of partners. You can have number of partners who can, the individuals, LLPs and companies can be partners. We'll all look into these details much in detail. This is just the features I'm highlighting. Concept of a designated partner was introduced. Earlier, there was no such concept. We always knew partners and directors. And friends, I will explain you the concept of a designated partner. And I can assure you, once you listen to this concept of a designated partner, nobody would like to become a partner in an LLP. Unlike we like to become director of a company, we like to become managing partners in a partnership, but we would not like to become designated partners. I can assure you, once you understand the real meaning of the designated partner. Then the partners are supposed to be the agents of the LLP and not each other. As I said earlier also, they bind the LLP but not each other. Unlike in a partnership firm where partners were binding each other, and because of the mistake of one partner, all the others were held liable. It doesn't happen that way. And then here comes your perpetual succession, that a time of 6 months is granted to admit new partners. So in case the number of partners go below 2, the remaining partner has 6 months to bring in a new partner. Till that time, the LLP will survive. It will just not be dissolved by default. Then audit of accounts is mandatory only if the turnover exceeds 40 lakhs or 25 lakhs. Unlike in a Companies Act, a company that audit is mandatory from day one. Here it is not the case. It is mandatory only if your turnover is exceeding 40 lakhs or your capital exceeds 25 lakhs. So friends, these were the basic features. Now we try to understand each individual concept of a LLP, like we now try and understand the partners. Minimum 2 partners are required, as we have seen. At least one has to be an Indian resident. No limit on the maximum number. So we discussed earlier, unlike in a private limited company, you have 200, or in a partnership, you have a limit of 50 and 10. Here, there is no maximum limit, so you can bring n number of partners. And then we should also understand who can become the partner. They're individuals or companies or LLPs. Basically, individual or a body corporate can only become a partner if you go by the LLP Act. So HUF cannot become a partner. This cannot become a partner. Individual or a corporate, because LLP is deemed to be a body corporate. So technically easier to remember. Individuals or body corporates can become a partner. Nobody else can become a partner in an LLP. What are the disqualifications of being a partner? Person is of unsound mind is not qualified to be a partner. A person declared, basically, if you see, these are the disqualifications of a person eligible to contract. If you are not eligible to contract, you will not be able to become a partner. A person declared insolvent, and also a person who has even applied for insolvency, he will not be able to become a partner. So it's not only that he should be of unsound mind or declared insolvent, but even if you applied for insolvency, you will not be able to become a partner. Try and understand the differences between partners versus shareholders, just to clarify the issues, because it is important to understand that. So in case of a company and the LLP, you have minimum 2 partners and minimum 2 shareholders. But yes, in a public limited company, that is, you will have minimum of 7 shareholders. That is the basic difference. Otherwise, the minimum is 2 for a private limited company or a LLP that you require. One Indian is mandatory now as per the Companies Act 2013 also. This is a mandatory requirement. Earlier it was not there under the old Companies Act. Then there is a limit on maximum number of shareholders in case of a private limited company. In case of a public limited company, or maybe a state company, or maybe a LLP, there is no upper limit, so you can have unlimited members. Now, friends, this again has to be noted that, as I told you earlier, that only individuals and body corporates can become partners in an LLP, whereas as far as shareholder is concerned, there are many other status of person who can become, like trust can become, HUFs can become shareholders. But this is that we need to understand that individuals and corporates and shareholders, many other status people can become. Then this is also important to understand the role of partners versus the role of shareholders. What does a shareholder do? Role of shareholder is only to take part in the AGM and appoint the board of directors, the rest, and approve the dividend. Basically, if you see in general parlance, this is all there, and rest all is done by the board of directors. Unlike in the LLP, every partner has equal role in the management until stated otherwise. Please note, every partner by default has a role in the management. Although there is a concept of designated partners are not equal to directors, which we will see later. So every partner, the moment you become a partner, you have a right in the management. You cannot say that no, only the designated partners will have the right in the management, unlike a company where only the directors have a right to manage the company, except for certain roles which are defined for the shareholders. Partners here play all the roles. Now we come to the concept of designated partners. Designated partners, friends, earlier in 2008 it was brought. Then we used to get a separate DPIN number, designated partner identification number, which was then merged with the DIN. And then now DIN is common for both DPINs as well as directors. There has to be minimum 2 designated partners in a LLP, and LLP is one of them has to be an Indian resident. Just like a director in a company, you have to have 2, or maybe in case of a public limited company 3, and then at least one of them has to be Indian resident. Who can become a designated partner? Individuals, nobody other than a. It has to be a person who can think naturally, not an artificial mindset person. So individuals can only become a designated person. Friends, this is where I was speaking earlier, that once you understand the role of a designated partner vis-a-vis the LLP Act, nobody would like to. Designated partner only has duties as per the Act. It has got no rights. Designated partners are required to discharge all the obligations or compliances as required under the LLP. Simple. That is, he has to ensure that all the forms are filled in time, all the compliances are done. In case there is a delay, designated partners will be personally liable for penalty. Then that penalty, my friends, is as low as 10,000 rupees and as high as 5 lakh rupees. So you can imagine you do not have a right by default. The only role of a designated partner is a duty that you have to ensure that all the compliances are discharged. Otherwise, the designated partner would personally be held liable. And now even the income tax has put in a duty that the returns have to be signed by the designated partners. Personally liable for all the penalties levies on the LLP for contravention of provisions. So friends, after this, I am sure if you just explain this role to any of your clients, nobody would like to become a designated partner. So if you want to give them a role, you will have to specifically assign them the rights. Now we try to understand the difference between a designated partner versus a director. So roles played. As I told you, the role of a director is to manage the company, to run the show, whereas the partner's role is only a duty assigned by the LLP Act to ensure that the compliance are done. And if it is not, they are personally liable. Yes, the directors are also made personally liable as per the 113 Act, 2013 Companies Act, but still, partners do duties and liabilities. I told you, directors run the show, so they are liable for all the wrong acts that they are doing. Their duty is to run the company property. Here, designated partners' official duty is only to ensure the compliance. The rest of the duties, as I told you, all the partners have an equal role in the management. Designated partners do not have any specific assignment until given by the agreement, which we will look into. Third important component of a LLP is the contribution or the capital that we call it. Initial contribution is nothing but it is equal to a share capital in case of a company. Partners capital that we bring in case of a partnership. But yes, the basic difference is company you have to bring in case of a private limited company minimum of 1 lakh rupees. For public limited company minimum of 5 lakh rupees, and maybe it may increase depending on the type of company that you are forming. Unlike that, in case of a LLP, there is no minimum contribution required. So it can go as low as 1,000 rupees, no problem. You can start with an initial capital of 1,000 rupees. That's not a problem at all. The contribution can be in tangible form or intangible form. So you can either bring in cash, that is tangible. You can bring in your movable or immovable property, again that's tangible, or you can bring in your services. Supposing you are taking a new some article has cleared chartered accountancy and you find him to be suitable and you want to give him a partnership. He says, sir, I don't have the money, I have just cleared my chartered accountancy, so I would be glad to become your partner, but I cannot give contribution. So what I can say, whatever fees that you would have paid me or the charges, 50% of that you please take it in the form of a capital. Can be done. That is tangible form. So you can get it. Somebody may have a patent which he would like to partner with it. So he can come with a patent or a goodwill or a, you can say, trademark value, and that is an intangible form. So a contribution can be in any mode. The nature of and value of contribution has to be stated, whether it is cash, movable property, services, patent, and trademark, whatever it is. In case of non-cash contributions, only one thing you have to take care is that it has to be valued by either a practicing chartered accountant, cost accountant, valuer from the approved panel. So these three type of people can only value that non-cash contribution. Be a movable property, immobile property, or your services or patent, what you need. And no reserve account has to be maintained. This is a big dichotomy. In the process, we'll try to understand there are many dichotomies. The LLP Act says something, whereas if you look on into what the actual procedures are and the forms have been brought out by the bureaucracy, they say something different. This is one of the biggest examples that no reserve account is to be maintained. This is what is stated in the Act, but then You read form number 8, which we file for the annual accounts of LLP. It states, please give your reserve fee. When reserve account is not to be maintained, how can you ask me a reserve fee? This is one of the things we'll understand. And another advantage here you have got is that partners can grant loan to the LLP. Unlike in a company, you are bound by the acceptance of deposit rules and all that. You can accept loans from LLP without any conditions. There are no guidelines. Yes, definitely 40B of the income tax would come into being on the interest that is allowable under the Income Tax Act. Otherwise, there is no such restriction. And friends, having understood the important distinction, so now to form an LLP, like in a company, we have a memorandum and article of association. A partnership, we have a partnership deed. LLP, we have something called as an LLP agreement, which is the heart and soul of the LLP. And friends, I can assure you that this is one of the most flexible and beautiful documents. There is no predefined format. You can design it as you want. You can put all the clauses that you wish. There are no restrictions as long as they are legally acceptable clauses. That only you have to think. You can put in whatever you can visualize, whatever you can think. We'll look how various different types of clauses can be put in. I'll prepare the agreement. First, let us understand definition of a LLP agreement. Section 210 of the LLP Act defines LLP agreement as return agreement, return agreement between the partners of the LLP or between the limited partner LLP and its partners, which determines the mutual rights and duties of the partners and their rights and duties in relation to that limited liability partnership. Why I'm being friends on the word return agreement is because in the first schedule of the LLP agreement, it says if the agreement is not written, there is a contradiction in the act itself. First schedule says in case there is no written agreement, whereas 210 mandates the definition itself mandates that it has to be a written. Then when we initially used to start incorporate LLPs, they never used to ask for an agreement, and they just used to ask for the information in form number 3 that we fill for the agreement. Then they started asking, you have to give an agreement. So we are professionals. We do is we just take a piece of paper, agreement of so and so LLP formed and signed by so and so X and Y finish, and then we attach. Say no, this is not do. Initially they accepted, then they said this will not do. You will have to attach the whole of the agreement. Then the whole agreement used to be attached. Without stamping, nothing on a plain paper. Again, then the objection started coming, no, it has to be duly stamped. So this is how the process has gone into an LLP agreement also. What is the stamping and all, we will look in the future subsequently. So LLP agreement can be executed before or after the incorporation. Unlike your memorandum or article of association, which has to be signed before the execution, LLP agreement has to be executed, can be either before or incorporation. In the absence of the agreement, the provision of first, this is the dichotomy. In case you do not have an agreement, the provision of first schedule apply, but you can read it another way also, because now anyhow, if you have the agreement is required, otherwise form 3 will not be accepted. But you can read it in this way, that any of the clauses which are listed in the first schedule, if they are missed in your agreement, then they will apply, the first schedule will apply. In case you do not want the clauses in the first schedule to apply, then you can change your clauses, and you have to ensure that at least those clauses are there as a part of your agreement as per your requirement. And in case the agreement is signed prior to the incorporation, immediately within 30 days, you will have to call a partner. Number 3 is you sit with your client, understand the requirement, draft the agreement properly, keep it ready. Once you get approval of form number 2, incorporation certificate, form number 16, immediately next day you get it stamped. Immediately on the third day you can fill in form number 13, no problem at all. Stop calling our partners. They said schedule will apply in case there is no schedule.
Sorry, sir.
All the
Ashish,
partners,
Ashish Tilwani ji, please mute yourself.
all the partners are entitled to share equally in the capital and profit. So if in your partner's LLP agreement, it does not say that the shares would be unequal, shares would be different, or the profit and losses sharing would be different, then by default it is equal. But yes, in case you meet differently, you can definitely put it in your agreement that ABC 3 partners and different ratios, profits can be shared in differently, losses can be shared differently, your capital bringing can be differently, all three can be different. There need not be any correlation between them. It is totally acceptable, no issues at all. Then by default, there is an indemnity clause. All partners entitled to take part in the management. See, as I told you initially, all the partners are entitled to take part. But if you want to restrict, yes, you can do it. That okay, out of 4 partners, only 2 partners will be entitled to take part in the management. So if your agreement states it, that you are restricting, or you can say only the designated partners are entitled to take part in the management, you can very well do that. But until you mention in the agreement the role of designated partners is only a duty and a responsibility, nothing else. So if you want to give them a benefit, you have to mention it in your agreement over there. No partner is entitled to remunerations. Look, friends, if your agreement is silent on the remuneration part, again, as per first schedule, no partner is entitled to remuneration. So please take care of these clauses. No new partner can be introduced without the consent of all partners. All decisions have to be taken with the majority of partners' consent. This also can be changed if you want a veto to be given to somebody. Like I'll give you an example that there is a building project going on and somebody has just brought in a plot and he is not concerned in the day-to-day management. He says, you develop the plot, you prepare the building. I am not concerned. I am only concerned with my plot. So what is in the agreement, you can write very clearly that in case there is any decision relating to the main project per se, that is mortgaging the plot, mortgaging the project, taking a big loan against that project or discarding, then that ex-partner will have a veto. Otherwise, he will not involve in the day-to-day management. Y and Z may be involved in the day-to-day management. This also can be written. So you, as I told you, this is a very flexible document. You can mention it very systematically. Minutes have to be recorded within 30 days and all decisions are to be recorded. You have to render true accounts, non-compete clause. Partners cannot be excelled by majority unless prior agreed. And disputes to be referred to the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 96. Friends, again I repeat, first schedule just says that in case your agreement is silent on any of these clauses, then the first schedule will apply. Otherwise, the act is so flexible that the agreement is supreme. Agreement will prevail over the first schedule as long as you are clearly able to identify that what your agreement says and it is different from your first schedule. But if your agreement is silent, then the first schedule will apply. Otherwise, the first schedule would not apply. It is only a deemed provision in case of omissions. So what are the checkpoints that we need to have while preparing an agreement? Because it is important to have a legal agreement that we are doing. We need to have good checkpoints. I'm not going into the recitals, this LLP agreement dated so and so between X, Y, and Z. I'm not going, we are all professionals. So what does it need to have? First and foremost is your objects. So friends, again, coming to the objects, it is very important. The objects that you write in form number 1 or the application form when you apply for your name of the LLP, those objects have to be very properly drafted, because when you fill in the incorporation form, form 2, or maybe the agreement form, form number 3, that object is picked up. You are not allowed to change the object. So you have to draft it and exactly those objects should be mentioned in your agreement. Now there are certain restrictions on those. Earlier, unlimited objects characters were allowed. Then they restricted to 2000 characters. Now the restriction is restricted to 500 characters. Mind you, a space or a full stop is also a character as per the computer jargon. So you have to mention the objects in that clause, and moreover, please take care. What we are used to doing is we are used to writing as per a company, ancillary objects, other objects. Here it will not suffice. Whatever you have mentioned in that 500 characters, that is only final. I have seen LLP agreements coming in and then subsequently saying apart from this we will have ancillary objects and other objects. Then legally it will not stand. It may be a problem legally standing that. So please take care that you restrict it to 5. And I know it's difficult. But in my book itself, I had given 10 to 12 examples of the drafting of the objects for different type of industries, how it can be done. And moreover, in a partnership also, we are used to writing and other business as maybe mutually decided. The moment you put in, it will be rejected. So please ensure that you are very specific. You cannot keep anything open or vague as far as the LLP agreement is concerned. And the second foremost point is your registered address has to be mentioned. Yes, you can have a registered address as well as a corresponding address or a corporate address. You will have to just fill in form number 18 and give it to them. You can have a separate form. Then contribution, the capital that you are bringing in. Friends, again, here I would like to tell you, as I told you, the contribution can be as low as 1,000 rupees, but then contribution can be staggered also. Here there is no condition, unlike a Companies Act, that the contribution has to be brought within 1 month. So you can clearly mention that, okay, my contribution is 2 crore rupees, but we will initially bring in at the time of formation 1 lakh rupees. And if you say, if you are in a big project of a building, you can say, okay, at the time of acquisition of the plot, we will bring in another 50 lakh rupees. At the time of the foundation, we will bring in another 20 lakh rupees, and so on and so forth. So it can be clearly mentioned. It is event based. It is totally acceptable. No issues on that. So upper limit, that is sort of your authorized contribution, would be 2 crore rupees, but it can be brought and you can clearly define it at the beginning. No issues at all. The mode of contribution has to be mentioned, whether it will be cash, somebody is bringing in a property and all that. And as I told you earlier also, if you are bringing in non-cash, then it has to be properly valued and that mode has to be mentioned. And then in case you have a changes in contribution, friends, unlike a company, the changes in contribution is very, very simple in a LLP. Like supposing you want to increase the capital, you don't have to rush every time to your registrar with the increase of authorized form number 5 and paying the stamp duty and all that. You just have to change your LLP agreement, just file a supplementary agreement that, okay, now we are increasing, or even in case of a reduction, you don't have to go through the process. You just file a supplementary agreement that my contribution was 2 crore rupees, but now since there are some issues and we cannot bring in, we reduce it to 10 lakh rupees. No problem at all. You can do it. You don't have to rush through the process of the court approval or the tribunal approval and all that. It's very simple. Then you can mention your sharing of your profits and losses, how your profits and losses are shared individually, equally. Profits may be different, losses may be different. You can write anything. Then remuneration, you have to write, as I told you. If you don't write, technically no partner is entitled for remuneration. So please mention in your agreement the remuneration are you giving, and please do not mention remuneration will be paid as per 40B of the income tax. You should quantify. 40B has got sufficient safeguards that if it is not allowable as a deduction, then there will be no double taxation on that. So please quantify that X will get 25,000 rupees per month, Y will get so and so. Please quantify. Don't go by the jargon that which we normally do. We are used to doing in a partnership, that remuneration will be as per 40B. Please do not do that. Designated partners, their rights and obligations. So you have to mention who are the designated partners, and if you want to give them rights like management rights and all that, please mention that they will have management rights, and then their indemnification also has to be written, because if designated partners are made to pay penalties because of some other partners, because they are liable to pay penalties for delays, then they should be indemnified also. Why should they be penalized? So that also you can mention. Then you can mention the rights and obligations of partners. You can give overall rights. You can give co-partner individual rights. As I told you, that a veto can be set for individual partner, that he has a veto on this. So as far as the decision relating, in case of a building project relating to the overall project or the plot is concerned, then X would have a first right, and then so on and so forth. Based on your requirement, you can do that. So rights and obligations of partners can be defined. It's a very flexible document. All you can think of. The only thing is that it should be within the four corners of the law. Then admission, retirement, exposure, not death of a partner. So how you will admit a partner? What will happen on retirement? What will happen? How do you expel a partner? What will happen on the death of a partner? Whether you want to add the legal heirs, whether you don't want to add the legal heirs. In case only one partner remains, so how will the remaining partner conduct the procedure of bringing in the remaining partner within 6 months that we have? So everything you can define over here. And you can also assign your financial interest, whether you can also define whether the partners can assign their financial interest. Like we mortgage our shares in a company, here also the financial interest can be assigned, but it is very clear that only the financial interest can be assigned, not the managerial board. So supposing there are 3 partners XYZ and X needs funds, so he assigns it to say A, that okay, I have a financial interest in this LLP, you please do that. A will write to the LLP that I have got an assignment, please share whatever his profits and earnings are, or that have to be coming to me directly. So they will go to him, but still X will have a role in the management. A cannot take part in the management. He can only look into the accounts and he can only demand a share of the profit. That's all. That is his role. The assignee cannot go more than the assignment of financial interest. Then how the meetings will be held, the minutes will be done. You have to define, as I told you, the Companies Act defines the procedure. Board meetings have to be held within 3 months. How the AGM has to be held and all that. LLP Act is totally silent. So you can define how the frequency of the meetings, when you will have the meetings, how the minutes will be recorded. There's nothing in the act. You can do that. It's very flexible. Again, what will be the procedure of the role from family members and all that? As I told you, there are no restrictions as per the Companies Act also, like we have a acceptance of deposit rules. Here you don't have anything. You can freely accept the loan from partners, loan from relatives. Yes, you have to take care of Section 40B of Income Tax Act. That is the upper limit on the interest that you pay. Other than that, there are no restrictions as per the LLP Act. Then you can put in a non-compete clause, if any. That is up to you, whether the partners can compete with each other. They can compete with the LLP till they are the partners, or maybe some period after they are the partners. So anything can be put in. In case you want to define the banks also, the accounting procedure and audit, although the LLP Act says that audit is mandatory only after 40 lakhs of contribution turnover, but you can have from day one, so that you will have to mention in the LLP agreement, and accordingly the procedures have to be defined. Then the appointment of auditors and all procedures can be given here. There's nothing in the LLP Act, unlike in a Company Act, there's nothing over here. So all procedures can be defined. Then restrictions of partners, you want to give them any restrictions? How do you restrict the role? Whether the partners can do this, they cannot do this. So that also you can define in the agreement. Then you can mention the amendments to the agreement, how the agreement would be amended, how it will, what is the procedure for amendment. A meeting is to be called, 2/3 majority required, 3/4 majority required, and unanimous required in certain clauses. Clause by clause you can mention. Otherwise you can mention a general this thing. It's very flexible. Indemnity clause, as I told you, it can be indemnifying the partners against the mistakes of the other partners, indemnifying the designated partners, indemnifying the LLP against the mistake of the other partners. So everything can be mentioned. Winding up procedures can be mentioned. How the disputes will be resolved. Normally it is through the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, but if you don't want that, you can clearly mention it will be subject to jurisdiction of a court or mediation procedure or whatever it is. It is very flexible, no issues. And there are certain ancillary clauses you can put in case it is a conversion from a firm. You will have to mention that it has been converted from a firm or a conversion from company, and other restrictions or obligations that you would like to put. It is totally up to you. There is no such. I just listed out certain important checkpoints. They need not be there. They can be there. There can be much more depending on your requirements. So whatever I told you is nothing sacrosanct that it has to be followed, but it can be much more also. Now coming to the stamp duty. On an LLP agreement, LLP per se There is not defined under any of the stamp acts, but now all the stamp acts treat LLP as a partnership. So whatever is the stamp duty applicable on a partnership is applicable over here. So you can say that 50,000 for the first 50,000 rupees, 500 rupees for every 50,000 rupees that you have to pay, subject to a maximum of 15,000 rupees. Yes, in case you are bringing in an immovable property, then the stamp duty that is payable as per a conveyance will be payable. So that you have to take care. This is the stamp duty. Unlike in case of a memorandum and article, you have a fixed rate and all. Here it is nothing. It's just like a partnership. And stamp duty payable on conversion to LLP. When you convert a partnership to LLP, because you're converting a partnership to partnership under the Stamp Act, also it is treated as a partnership. So there is no question of a stamp duty. The issue arises when you have a conversion of a company to an LLP. So there was a judgment also under Chapter 9, where it was held that because all the benefits and rights and obligations are the same, so it should not be charged. But still the stamp duty authorities are insisting. So what I would suggest is you can approach the stamp duty officers, superintendent, approach them for adjudication, explain to them, satisfy them, and normally they accept your contention and there may be no stamp duty. Otherwise, at the most, they will give you a concessional stamp duty of 2 to 3%, and you may not have to pay the whole stamp duty on that. So that is on an individual this thing. The best is you go in for adjudication and do it. Now we try and understand the difference between a LLP agreement versus a memorandum and article. The contents. LLP agreements, as I told you, memorandum articles normally have predefined consents by the Companies Act. They have draft this thing, article, then table A and all that are given for private limited companies. For public limited also there are certain guidelines that you can have this, you cannot have this, but there's nothing as per the LLP agreement is concerned. You can write anything and everything which is legally valid within the four corners of the law in the LLP agreement. It is a very flexible document. So there's a flexibility, you can amend very flexibly, and then to amend a LLP agreement, it is simple. You just have a partner's resolution, file a supplementary agreement, and it is done. Do the stamp duty, whatever is the differential, 500 rupees, or in case you are increasing capital. Otherwise, there is nothing. This such flexible. In case of amendment to memorandum and articles, there is no flexibility. You have to again go to the ROC for approval and all that. So here you don't need any approval. It is a very simple procedure. Then restrictions, again I told you, you have to rush to the ROC for everything. In case of a company, amending the memorandum articles, in case you need clarification. In case of a LLP agreement, you don't have to go to the ROC except for filing the supplementary agreement. That is it. They don't even look into the contents. As simple as that. Stamp duty also, I told you, memorandum and articles have a preset stamp duty listed under the Stamp Act, whereas as far as the LLP is concerned, it is treated as a partnership. So you end up paying the stamp duty on a partnership, a fixed stamp duty. It's very simplified. You don't have to go through the slab and all the contents. Now, having understood the features as per the LLP Act, there are one or two features like winding, which we'll look at the end. Let us understand the taxation aspects in case of a LLP. I would basically be going into the income tax aspects. So LLP under the Income Tax Act is to be taxed as a partnership firm. So since it is taxed as a partnership firm, partner shares to be exempt under 10(2)(a). There is no MAT. Returns to be signed by the designated partners. All the partners are jointly and several. This is one of the exceptions where the liability of the partners is joint and several. Otherwise, normally it is limited, because, and that too only in case of winding up. It is not a day-to-day liability, but only in case of winding up, the partners will be jointly and severally liable for the tax dues if there are pending. We look into details of all these clauses. So as I said, Section 223(1) includes LLP within the definition of the firm. 223(2) includes partner of LLP as a partner of a firm. Then LLP is treated as a partnership, 223. So, and then 140 states that the returns of the LLP say will be joint and several in case of all the partners. 44 AD explanation A specifically excludes LLP. Friends, please note 44 AD A allows LLPs in the last year, but 44 AD excludes LLP from being the definition. So 44 AD provisions are not applicable to LLP. And then, as I said, there is no MAT, there is no 115 JB, but yes, we have alternate minimum tax as is applicable to a partnership, which is applicable to the LLP here. 115 JD also tax credit for AMT paid will automatically, because there is an alternate minimum tax, we will get a tax credit also. Then 45(3), all these procedures relating to the partnership will be applicable here. Transfers of asset on dissolution. Now there have been amendments in the recent budget also. We will have to look into those also. Then 40B for remuneration and interest to partners, which I have been saying over and over. So that would also apply. So the remuneration limits are there up to 3 lakh 90%, and over and above 3 lakh it will be 60% of the amount above 3 lakh rupees. Interest to partners as of now it's 12%. It may change with the interest coming down. So you have to be alert. Then 48(2) for payments to related parties also will apply. Taxation on conversion to LLP. Friends, if you convert a firm to LLP, if all partners continue to be partners in LLP and all rights and obligations are the same, there will be no. So if you even look at the second schedule, which defines the second schedule of the LLP Act, which will look, the conversion part will look later. What is the procedure of conversion? If you look at the second schedule, the conversion of LLP, firm to LLP, it also says that all the partners have to be partners in the LLP and all rights and obligations and assets and liabilities have to be the same. You cannot change it. So by default, there is no tax on conversion of firm, because without that you cannot convert the firm into a LLP. So these conditions have to be fulfilled. As far as the conversion of company to LLP is concerned, there are 7 conditions given under section 47(13)(b). If you fulfill all the 7 conditions, then only there will be no tax on the LLP or in the hands of the partners. Otherwise, there would be a tax. And if you just look at it, 3 of the conditions by default by virtue of 3rd and 4th schedule of the LLP Act for conversion of a company to LLP, they would by default come into being. So you have to take care of only 4 of these issues. Then 47(a)(4) has been added to state that in case the conditions laid down in 47(13)(b) are not complied, then the gains arising from transfer of capital in the year in which the conditions are not complied. So if 3 years after the conversion you do not comply any of the conditions, or you fail to comply with the condition, then in that year the capital gains will be charged. So that you have to take care. Now, what are the conditions of 47(13)(b)? The 7 conditions, as I told you, initially there were 6. Since then, in spite of that, many companies were being converted, so they introduced the 7th condition also. First and foremost is all the assets and liabilities of the company immediately before the conversion become the assets and liabilities of the LLP. This is also there in your 3rd and 4th schedule, so by default complied, no issues at all. All shareholders of the company before the conversion become the partners of LLP, and their capital contribution and profit sharing ratio in the LLP are in the same proportion as the shareholder. So not only that, the contribution also has to be in the same proportion in the original company, the profit sharing ratio. This also is a mandatory provision as per the 3rd and 4th schedule. So it is complied. Nothing to worry. The moment you convert a company to this thing, it is complied. The 3rd consideration is the shareholders of the company do not receive any consideration of benefit directly or indirectly other than by form of share of profit and capital. So all the rights and obligations have to be the same. It is given in the 3rd and 4th schedule. You cannot take anything, you cannot withdraw, or you cannot get anything over and above. So this is also complied. This is important, friends. The aggregate of the profit sharing ratio of the shareholders of the company in the LLP shall not be less than 50% at any time during the period of 5 years from date of conversion. So after conversion, you can bring in other partners, but the original partners which were there, their profit sharing ratio should not be less than 50%. Please mind that. The moment you go to 49%, the condition will. So this is the condition with the highest period, that is 5 years. The other conditions are for 3 years. You have to look into. but this is for 5 years. So this you have to be very alert that the original partner should continue to have at least 50%. The total sales turnover or gross receipts in business of the company in any of the 3 previous, mind you friend, it is not average, it is any of the 3 previous years preceding, shall not exceed 60 lakhs. Representations have gone to the ministry, but they are not willing to increase it because they don't want more and more companies to convert to LLPs. This is the problem, that the ministry, although the act has been passed, but still they are not supporting LLPs as they should be. So this is the problem, that in case the turnover of your company or the gross receipts were greater than 60 lakhs in any of the years, you cannot convert. So supposing last 2 years do not have a turnover, but in the third year, that's 3 years prior, you had a turnover of 61 lakhs, you will not be able to convert. It's not the average, it's any of the 3 years. And the total, this is the 7th clause that was inserted. It was not there in the beginning because the companies were being converted, like big groups like Reliance and all that, they converted a lot of companies. So they said that in the 3 previous years, in any of the 3 previous years, if your value of the assets exceeded 5 crores, you will not be able to convert. So this was one of the reasons. This is the 7th clause which was added. And the last clause is no amount is paid either directly or indirectly to any partner out of balance of accumulated profit standing in the, so whatever profits you have earned post conversion you can withdraw, but the accumulated profit, that the reserves that were there in the company and you have carried over for 3 years, you cannot withdraw. So there is only one case relating to this, which is from the Kerala tribunal, where the partners, they see, we are professionals, we act smartly. So what they did was they withdrew the surplus not as a surplus withdrawal but as a loan in the proportionate ratio to the share in the profits. So what the tribunal held, that it is just nothing but window dressing, and you are withdrawing all the amount, although you are taking it out as a loan, we will treat it as a window dressing. And they said that 4730B is not complied, and hence they had to pay that liability. Effects on conversion further under the taxation. The proviso has been amended relating to depreciation, that the total depreciation claimed prior to the conversion, post conversion should not exceed the total depreciation allowable during the year. 49(1)(3)A amended to provide that in case conversion, the cost of acquisition of the successor LLP shall be deemed to be the cost of acquisition. This anyhow goes by beyond saying, because when you convert a company to LLP, it has to be converted at book value. You cannot revalue and convert. Cost of acquisition of rights of partners shall be deemed to be cost of acquisition, so you cannot revalue, as I said. 115JA has been interested at no credit of MAT. So in case the company had a MAT credit, since there is no MAT over here, the MAT credit is also lost. In case you have a MAT credit remaining, you will have to forego that MAT credit, which was remaining prior to the conversion. 35 DDA says that all the amortization spending prior to the conversion will be allowed. Then 43(1) explanation 13 says that in case you have already claimed all the amortization 35 AD expenses, so their cost will be taken at nil. You cannot say that 3 years are not passed, 5 years not passed, I will claim. You cannot claim it. And then the WDV also of the assets will continue as was the WDV in the last prior to conversion. You cannot revalue the asset, that was already discussed. Then 72A also, it says that if you do not also fulfill 4713B, you will not be able to claim the unabsorbed losses or depreciation which you bring forward prior to conversion. So you have to ensure that 4713B is fulfilled so that you can get the benefit of unabsorbed losses or business unabsorbed depreciation which was there prior to the conversion. And in case you fail to fulfill any of the obligation within the period after conversion, that is in the before the 3rd year or the 5th year as applicable, then all this benefit that you have taken will be charged to tax in the year in which you do not comply with these provisions. Friends, now we move out to FDI, because this is also an important part and this is a major query that we are getting that whether LLPs will be eligible to claim FDI, whether they will be getting FDIs, because we are forming. This is a major query that is coming to me from most of the people. So initially, the central government white press note number 1 was brought in May 2011, which allowed restricted access to FDI and LLPs, which was brought in by our then finance minister, Shri Pranab Mukherjee ji, who went on to become the president. So it was just simple. Then there were amendments, and finally it was decided that this is the current position, that foreign direct investment is allowed in those sectors where 100% FDI is allowed through the automatic route. Exceptions: in case you have 100%, it is allowed in the automatic. You can bring in except sectors eligible to accept 100% FDI, but are subject to FDI linked performance related conditions like minimum capitalization norms applicable to NBFCs or development of township housing, and also minimum capital norms have to be fulfilled, although they may be allowed under the 100% route. Then sectors eligible to accept less than 100% FDI under the automatic route, they will not be able to accept. Sectors eligible to accept FDI under government approval route, they can do only through government approval route. But agricultural, plantation activity and print media are not allowed, although they may be under 100%, but these are the exceptions. You cannot get FDI. And mind you, even down the line, FDI is not allowed in these sectors. So if the LLP is down the line entity, then also you cannot get the FDI. Then sectors ineligible to accept FDI, any sector which is prohibited under the existing FDI policy. Then who are the eligible investors who can invest as FDI in the LLP? A person resident outside India or an entity incorporated outside India shall be eligible in the investor. But here also there are certain exceptions. We look. A citizen or an entity of Pakistan and Bangladesh is not eligible to bring in FDI and LLP. A SEBI registered FII, a SEBI registered foreign venture capital investor, or a SEBI registered QFI, a foreign portfolio investor registered in accordance with SEBI, also not eligible. So these were the exceptions who cannot bring in FDI. Now we'll look into the conversion aspects. We try to understand the taxation aspects on conversion, but we also need to understand how can a firm or a company be converted to an LLP. So what can be converted? It can be either a firm can be converted, or a private limited company, or an unlisted limited company. A listed public limited company cannot be converted to LLP, and the provisions are governed by second schedule in case of a firm, third schedule in case of a private limited company, and fourth schedule in case of a unlisted company. They define the procedures how the conversion can happen. And after the conversion, LLP is mandated to inform the concerned registering authority within 15 days of registration that yes, we have converted, please take note. So we try to understand the provisions of the second schedule, conversion of firm to LLP. As I also told you at the time of the taxation, all the partners of the firm have to be partners of LLP. Now friends, the issue over here arises. You have got 8 partners, 7 say, okay, we are ready to convert. The 8th one says no. So you cannot say while converting that 7 will convert and 8 no. So prior to convert, either you ask him to convert and then withdraw, that's okay. Or you have to first ask him to withdraw, retire from the firm. Then it has to be a registered firm, and unregistered firm cannot be converted. Please mind that. So a registered firm, again, you will have to wait till the procedure of registration of that retirement agreement is done. Then only you will be able to convert. So that you have to look into in case there is a dispute between the partners relating to conversion. And Form 17 has to be filled. LLP is to inform the register of firms about conversion within 15 days that yes, we have converted. You please delete our name. As I said, it has to be a registered firm. Unregistered firm cannot convert. So you have to inform the registration of firms and keep a record that you have intimated. Then all the assets, liabilities, and all the rights and obligations have to be transferred. So you cannot say we will not transfer this. This will be taken by the partners. All the assets and liabilities which are there as on the date of conversion have to be transferred. All the rights and obligations have to be transferred. Statement of conversion has to be maintained in all your correspondence for a period of 12 months, maybe your envelope, maybe your email, maybe your letterhead, whatever you do, whatever correspondence, it has to mention that it has been found after conversion from so and so firm. All the pending proceedings against the firm will continue against the LLP. So you just cannot get rid of the pending proceeding. There are proceedings against the firm, they will continue against the LLP. Partners will still be liable unlimited for the acts that they have done till the date of conversion, because up to that time there was unlimited liability. So if any liability arises on account of that period, the partners will be held liable. They cannot just say that today we are in a LLP and we are in a limited liability part, so we will not pay. Then all the agreements and contracts to continue as if of the LLP. So if you have an agreement with your vendors, your agreement with your staff, you have some other agreements with some other agencies and all that, security agreements and all that. So all you have to do is just put an addendum and everything will continue as if there was no change at all. Now, friends, we will try and look at the rules of private conversion of private and unlimited public company together, because only the schedules are different. Schedule 3 and Schedule 4, the regulations are the same. It is totally common. So I am just merging it. All the shareholders of the company have to be partners of LLP. So if you have got 50 shareholders, of the 50 have to become the partners. Their profit sharing ratios has to be the same. Their capital has to be the same. No security interest in the existing assets should be subsiding. So if you have a mortgage lying for any of the assets, so that you have to first temporarily clear, and then maybe again you can do a mortgage, because LLP Act also allows you a mortgage by filling in form number 8. Form 18 is to be filled. Again, see friends, this is what I call a joke. LLP to inform ROC about conversion within 15 days. On the other side, because the LLP is formed with the registrar of companies itself, and the ROC is mandated that because they are informed that it is being converted from company, so they are mandated that as soon as the company is converted to firm, the name of the company should be deleted. Still, they have put a onus on the partners and the LLP to inform to the ROC within 15 days that we have converted. I don't know why they need duplication of this work, but this is how the bureaucracy works. Again, all assets, liabilities, and all rights and obligations to be transferred. Statement of conversion, as we discussed in the firm, has to be mentioned in all the correspondence for 12 months. All your existing agreements and contracts will continue. All pending proceedings against the company will continue against the LLP, because ultimately everything practically is same except for the name and the structure. So you cannot take a plea that we are two different entities. Now, what about the accounts audit and filing? This is also an important part to understand. Accounts have to be maintained, although there are no guidelines. There are no Schedule 3, Schedule 2, nothing is there, no format given, but normal accounts have to be maintained. Statement of accounts and solvency has to be filed annually within 6 months of the end of financial year. Like in the company, we file AOC and other forms. Here only one form is to be filed, form number 8, within 30 days of the Act says it has to be filed within 6 months, but technically it has to be filed within 30 days of the end of 6 months of the end of financial year. So that comes to 30th of October. Please note that date. Form number 8 to be filed between 30th of October. No statement is to be attached, no balance sheet, nothing. Unlike in case of a company, you keep attaching that. Here nothing has to be attached. You have just to fill in the form. It is very simple. Fill in the form, attach the DSCs. Yes, there is another dichotomy. It says that in case there is an audit, then the digital of a chartered accountant is required, but they have made it mandatory for every form number 8. I don't know what is the logic behind it, but they have made it mandatory. So you have to only just take care that the digital signature of a chartered accountant is attached. You don't even have to mention whether the accounts are audited, date of audit, audit report. No document has to be attached. It is very simple form. If you look at form number 8, it is easier to fill in. Again, there is a dichotomy, as I told you in the beginning. The Act says there should be no reserves, whereas if you find this form, they have a column of reserves. So I don't know how the logic arrives over there. Then audit will be mandatory in case turnover exceeds the 40 lakhs or your contribution exceeds 25 lakhs. Friends, for the purpose of this, again, these people backdoor entry, as I call about the bureaucracy, that for the turnover, they also include other. If you read form number 8, they have a form, sales, turnover, and the services, and then there's a separate column for other income. But then they add totally and they say if it is above 40 lakhs, then they ask you whether it is audited or not, nothing else. And same if your contribution exceeds 25 lakhs, so you have to get it audited. But there is no format of an audit report, nothing is given. Audit has to be conducted by a chartered accountant, and then the other form, like in case of a company, we file form number 11, this one, annual returns. So here we transfer details and all that. Here you have to fill in form number 11, that is the annual return, and it is to be filled within 60 days of the end of the financial year. It's just nothing stating that who are the partners at the beginning, who are the partners at the end, whether there is any transfer, whether there are any addition, deletion. Simple form again. And if here also, if your capital is more than 25 lakhs, you have to get the signature of a company secretary. Otherwise, a normal digital signatures of 2 of your designated partners will suffice. And this has to be filed on or before 30th of May. So friends, again, I repeat for the sake of repetition, because it is important, form number 8 for accounts and solvency, and form number 11 for annual return. Form number 8 to be filed before 30th October, form number 11 to be filed before 30th of May. If you fail, 100 rupees per day of default is the penalty. You cannot avoid it. No waivers. Please take care. That's why I'm hampering on these 2 dates. And it is as simple. Unlike in a company, you have lot many compliances. Here you have only 2 annual compliances. Apart from your regular compliances, event-based compliances are there. That is a different issue. An annual return, as I told you, has to be certified by company secretary only if your contribution exceeds 25 lakhs. So now we try to understand the difference between comparison between accounts and audit related to LLP versus the company. So statutory requirements. Under the Companies Act and LLP Act, accounts are compulsory, but the audit, as I told you, under LLP is compulsory only when you exceed a turnover of 40 lakhs or a contribution of 25 lakhs, whereas under a company it is mandatory from day one. There is no specific requirement, no format given. So there is no format given for a balance sheet under the LLP Act as against in the Companies Act. Application of standards. The Companies Act mandates that standards have to be followed. There is nothing like that in the LLP Act. But yes, as chartered accountants, we are bound by the guidelines of the institute, and we have to ensure that the standards are followed. At least the mandatory standards are followed. So please take care that standards are followed while doing the audit. You just cannot say that since the LLP Act is silent, I will not do it. Audit report. There is no format of audit report under the LLP Act. Unlike in the Companies Act, you have to follow the CARO. Earlier there was MAO CARO, now you have CARO and all that. Under the LLP Act, there is no format of audit report. But yes, as chartered accountants, we are bound by the issued guidelines, and there are standards of audit 700 revised, which you have to look into, take care while we sign the audit report. The formats have to be looked into as are defined by our institute. Statutory audit also, it is mandatory in case of a company, whereas LLP, again I repeat, only if your turnover exceeds 40 lakhs or your capital increase 25 lakhs, you have to get it done. Now statutory filings for LLP company, you have a lot of statutory filings, MGT 7, MGT 14, your annual returns, XBRL, and all this and all that. There are a lot many things. LLP, apart from the event base, again I repeat, event base, that is supposing there's a change in the agreement within 15 days, change in the address within 15 days of the event, change in the partners within 15 days, you have to fill in a form. But apart from that, you have to fill in only 2 filings. Form number 8 before 30th October, form number 11 before 30th May. Simple as that. Just keep track of that. I keep hampering on this for the sake of repetition. You may think that why is he repeating, but it becomes easier for you and it will remain in your mind, these 2 dates and 2. For directors, designated partners, for every, they are both mandated to ensure that compliances are done, and directors are required to sign, designated partners are required to sign the forms here. For other stakeholders also, in case there is any transfer or something important, otherwise the same is here for LLP also, you need not file the documents. Now, what are the residuary clauses apart from what we have learned up to now? Mergers and acquisitions, the provision section 63A of the LLP Act, similar to the Companies Act, so I am not going into the procedures. Winding up and dissolution, friends. Again, I would like to bring in the bureaucracy over here, how there is red tapeism in the country. LLP Act originally, as it stated in the Act of 2008, it says just bring in a resolution, go to the tribunal, and your LLP can be wound up, no procedures. Then what happens is the bureaucracy thinks, how does it not come to us? How do we lose the power? Then what they do is LLP winding rules 2010 come into being. What they say, nothing for winding section 460 and above of the Companies Act 1956 to apply. So whatever the rules were there in 1956 Act, they just put in. Subsequently, there were representations, and then they simplified through the winding rules 2012 that you can go to NCLT and all that. Basically, if you see the procedures laid down by the Companies Act 56 are applying. So this is a backdoor entry which they have done, with the Act doesn't specify, but they have done through a notification. Now, friends, this was all about what the Act and the law says. Now we will try to understand in the next 10-15 minutes, and then I will go for question and answer. The next 10 minutes we'll try to understand what are the legal aspects and the documentation required. Again, I repeat, the LLP Act doesn't mandate any documentation, but what documentation you should have, the procedures you should follow, which will help you, because many cases come to me of disputes, then we find that there are no proper documentation, no proper procedures followed, so it becomes difficult to defend. So based on that, I have just listed out, so it will just take 10 minutes. So documentation, friends, I have bifurcated the documentation of a LLP into 4: master data, statutory records, ancillary records, and recurring records. You have to keep this type of bifurcation and the data as per this bifurcation. So what can be added in your master records? First and foremost is your incorporation certificate, because that is your birth certificate. Without that, you cannot fund. Then there's the LLP agreement, which is the sole, because that defines the rule and working. So without the LLP agreement, you cannot function. So that also becomes part of your master record. And any supplementary agreement, as and when you keep doing it, please just keep on adding. Nothing, so that part becomes part of your master records. List of partners and consent of the partners. Here, as we form a company, we take the consent of the shareholders, but subsequently we only take a transfer form. Here, whenever new partners are added, a consent is required. So please take a consent and keep it along with the list of partners. Then similarly, list of designated partners and their consent has to be obtained in writing. Resignations, if at all, of the partners have to be obtained separately. And then there are forms 8 and 9 which we fill for addition as a partner or resignation as a partner, which you have to fill in. So copies of those have to be maintained. Then resolutions for amending your LLP agreements, including admission, retirement, changeover, whatever you are doing. So those resolutions of your partners meeting, that you should also keep handy along with your concerned supplementary agreements as and when you change it. So this forms part of your master records. What is your statutory record? That's your statutory registrations like PAN, TAN, GST, IEC, Provident Fund, Profession Tax, ESI, etc. Whatever else you may have, labor laws, other laws, factory rules. Please maintain your statutory records in one file. Then your minute books. As I said, there is no default provision, but you have to maintain the minutes. So wherever you maintain, you may have just one meeting in a year just to approve the account. That's okay, no problem. You may not have n number of meetings, or a meeting can be held as and when required for certain important decisions. So just keep a minute book. There's no pre-described format or something like that, but you have to keep copies of the important resolutions that you pass, copies of your returns, including your ROC returns, that's form number 8 and 11 that you are filing, or other documents that you are filing event based. Then your income tax and other returns like your GST return. Earlier we had a VAT returns and then VAT audit 704 and all that. Other statutory submissions that you are doing. Then this is the ancillary records, not directly related to official, but you may have agreements with your vendors, you may have agreement with your employees, you may have with your contractors, suppliers, whatever it is. So all the agreements and contracts, you can keep it as an ancillary record. Ownership records of properties, so your property agreements and all, if you have properties in the name of LLP, so you can maintain ownership records. Auditor and company secretary appointments, if any, although there is no procedure defined, but the institute also gives guidelines that you have to appoint auditors through following a proper procedure, getting NOC from earlier auditor and all that. Unlike the company, there is no procedure that you have to appoint within the first month itself, and there is no concept of AGM, so the partners can just meet in any meeting and they can appoint. So that you have to look into. There is no procedure, but appointments have to be done. Their consent has to be obtained. And then audited financial statements will form there. And all your audit reports from maybe statutory auditors or tax auditors, including your VAT audit, excise audit, GST audit, and all that you are getting. So that will form your part of your ancillary records, and they would have to be kept. So friends, basically, if you look, the master, statutory, and ancillary are your perpetual records that you have to mention. And this last, this also details of bank accounts and authorized signatories, whatever you have, the resolutions relating to that, policies and operation manuals if you have in your company for running the show. And the recurring records are the recurring ones which you need not keep perpetually. Depending on the law, you can keep for some period. One is your regular, definitely your books of account, fixed asset register, excise records if applicable, labor records. So this you can keep up to a period, but the other three were perpetual records we will have to maintain. I just gave you a segregation. Now we come to the meetings. Please issue a proper notice. Now, what is the proper notice? The question will say. The LLP Act doesn't say. Friends, as I told you, you can define the procedure in your agreement that the notice can be issued 7 days prior, 3 days prior, 1 day prior, whatever is the, please define in your agreement. Accordingly, a proper notice has to be issued. Maintain your proper minutes, maintain proper attendance record. I am just telling you, mind you, again, I am for the sake of repetition. I have received many disputes and records were not proper, so there were issues, and in certain LLPs these records were beautifully maintained, so we could fight against the partners who were doing mischief over there. And the statutory obligations, you have, as I again repeat, ROC, there are only 2: annual return form 11 up to 30th of May, statement of solvency form number 8 up to 30th of October. Income tax, your returns and audits you have to file as per the due dates. GST and allied lines, audits and returns as and when you have to file as per the due dates. Cost audit report, GST report, or VAT audit report, excise report, and all that you will have to file as per your due dates. Friends, this is all from me. I am now open for your questions, and I would again like to thank the Ulhasnagar CP Study Circle for having given me opportunity to present my views. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, I'll ask Mukesh to pick up the queries that have come in the chat box. Mukesh, are you available?
Yeah, Roshni.
Okay, please proceed.
So the first
Then you can take over.
so should I go ahead with the queries? Hello. Vijay sir, should I go ahead with the queries? The first query is, if LLP is dealing in many projects. Am I audible?
Yes, Mukesh, you are audible.
Yeah. If LLP is dealing in many projects, then for some particular projects, can one partner may be excluded from a profit or loss of some projects? Vijay sir, should I repeat the question again?
Hello.
Hello. Vijay sir, should I repeat the question again? I think.
Yeah, please. Now I can hear you. There was some problem in my end.
Okay. Now the first query is, if LLP is dealing in many projects, Then for some
Yeah.
particular projects, can one partner may be excluded from profit or loss of some project?
Yes.
Yes, it can be excluded. Okay.
Yes. That's what I told you. It's
Next.
a flexible document. There's no problem.
Okay. Next query is, in case of conversion of firm to LLP, then the
Yeah.
new pen is required to be applied or not?
Technically,
will
yes.
LLP
Many people are going for the same PAN, but it creates a confusion because you are changing the status. In my opinion, a new PAN should be up.
Okay. And will the LLP be able to carry forward the loss of partnership
Yes.
if one partner is not in LLP?
No, you have to be in LLP, otherwise you cannot convert itself.
Okay.
The basis conversion is that everybody has to be there.
Okay. Everybody should be a partner.
Yes.
And sir, next question is whether any relief is given in due date of filing of Form 11 for FY 2021, which is due on 30th May due to COVID. I think yes.
As of now, they were to give, they are not. They had brought in a LLP settlement scheme. We, on behalf of the institute, are also still approaching them to extend that scheme, which ended on 31st December. So as of now, there is no relief.
Sir, but that was, I think they have extended. No? There is one circular of they have extended all the filing up to 30th June.
Yeah, so yeah, Form 11 is there, Form 8 is not extended.
Okay.
But that is only for 21, this one, March 21, not of March 20.
Yes, that was the question is only regarding 21 only.
Okay.
It is 31st July.
Yeah, Bhupesh, another question.
Yeah, are there any restriction in LLP for doing a business of manufacturing or future and options or investment?
If you go to register a LLP over there, they will ask you to be registered as a NBFC and a minimum capital of 2 crore.
Okay. Now there is question whether it is better to incorporate a partnership firm or LLP. Which entity is better?
For what purpose?
Sorry?
I would suggest a LLP. As I told you, LLP gives you the benefit of both a company as a partnership.
Okay. Whether FDI is permitted in LLP. Practically, is it possible to transfer the share of profit to overseas partner of LLP?
Yes, if you have formally, and as I gave you the rules that except where 100% FDI through the automatic route is allowable, subject to the exceptions, FDI is allowable. No?
Okay. Question number again. Second question is Section 47(13)(b) condition of 60 lakhs or 5 crore is not satisfied. So can conversation take place?
Under capital gain.
Sorry. So I had not read the whole question. Should I read the whole question because there was a long question? So I will then. Section 47(13)(b) condition of 60 lakhs or 5 crore is not satisfied. So can conversion take place? If yes, it become a non-tax neutral conversion. So what will be the tax implication of such conversion in the hands of company, LLP as well as shareholder?
A conversion can take place because the 60 lakhs turnover criteria or 5 crore asset criteria is as per the income tax. It is not as per the LLP Act. So conversion under the LLP is done as per the LLP Act and not as per the Income Tax Act. So the Income Tax Act says that if you can convert it, but if you don't follow, then it becomes a non-tax. So there will be both the taxes, one in the hands of the company, because then if there are assets, then they will be revalued, and based on the revaluation, there is supposed to be a capital gains which will be charged in the hands of the company, and accordingly the value of the share of the partners, that is the shareholders of the share, will increase, and they would also be liable to capital gains.
Okay. Sir, is there any restriction in LLP for doing a business of manufacturing?
No restriction. No restriction. Even in
no
this Startup India, LLP has been included.
Okay. Sir, whether a registered partnership firm can convert to LLP, by registered, does it mean the registered as per the respective state laws?
Yes, registered as per respective state laws under the registrar of firms. Otherwise, you cannot convert. It has to be a registered partnership.
So that's all with the queries. Is there any other query which we can take up?
Members, you can unmute yourself and ask your queries if you have any.
Form number 11 for FY 2021 is 31st July, na?
Yeah, June that can be verified. Because they said that only forms which are liable in April and May have been extended, but that then there is only one form technically, which is form number 11, which is to be verified.
Thank you.
With this, we end our question and answer session. Now I request CA Haridudani sir to give a formal vote of thanks to Vijay Kevalramani sir. Over to you, Vijay sir.
Thank you, Mukesh. First of all, friends, I am working closely with Vijay sir in many professional associations. He was the first person to start webinar in last year during the lockdown. Thereafter, webinar series started. And he has conducted various webinars independently and series of webinar like on NDS. So I had witnessed all these things Vijay sir has carried on since last year. As today's seminar, we saw that he is authority in LLP laws. In today's session, he started with the historical aspect of LLP law. Then he spoke about the LLP Act, then such as the taxation and conversion of LLP. Then finally, he spoke about many practical aspects which we should know in our day-to-day practice. So it was really a very knowledgeable, enhancing session, and he presented his views really clearly in lucid language. So with this, on behalf of Ulhasnagar Study Circle, I propose hearty vote of thanks to Vijay sir. Thank you, Vijay bhai.
Thanks, Hari, and thanks again to the organizer of this webinar, the Ulhasnagar CP Center conveners, Roshni and Mukesh, and also thanks to D2 for being present and CCM Srinivas. And thanks to all the members for giving me a patient listen.
Thank you, sir. It really was a great session.